That's exactly.
It's focused on, that should be a careful temp.
Yes, and also all of whom have their own mayors.
Yeah, and
All of whom do.
Councillors, please be outstanding for the Mayor of Farnham, Councillor Alan Deerwaker, the Lord Lieutenant Anthony Spinet, along with Reverend Alan Crawley.
Please be seated. Good evening, councillors.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, councillors. Welcome to the council tonight, and welcome Lord Lieutenant Teddy, and the Lord Lieutenant has got his cadet with him tonight. So welcome to you as well. Also, welcome to Reverend Alan Crawley, who will lead us in prayers. Thank you very much.
Let us pray. Loving God, who calls and draws all people to find their vocation in Him, we pray for the councillors of this town, that they may serve all the people they represent to the best of their ability. And we give thanks for all the work that they have done and for the recognition they have received as Council of the Year. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion and fill us with your grace as we make decisions that affect those of this town. Continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen. I now invite you to join me, if you wish, in the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and of his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, be among you and remain with you always. Amen.
Thank you, Alan. You are welcome to stay, but I know that you're...
I have another meeting, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. So,
Something did happen.
have we got anyone on Zoom, Town Clerk? And also welcome to our visitors on Zoom and visitors in the Town Council chamber. You are most welcome. So we're starting off tonight's meeting with a very special ceremony, and the Lord Lieutenant is here to conduct that ceremony. Over to you, Lord Lieutenant.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, we councillors and all of you who are on the Zoom call. I'm really thrilled and delighted to be with you here this evening. What you have achieved as a council and as a town is really quite breathtaking. And I gather that 10,000 towns or 1,000 towns. I was right. 10,000 towns in actual fact entered the competition. And for you, Farnham, to come out on top is the most extraordinary result to achieve. I've often been to Farnham and have known it for many years, and I'm always regard myself as an interloper from Guildford. But you all in Farnham have a huge respect for the town, and there's a real love out there, and you are so connected with it and its history. So whenever I come here, I always feel a really special atmosphere. And whenever I've been walking around with Ian, because he's got me up ladders to do farm in bloom and hang baskets, and he's got me digging and planting bedding plants. But it's always, whenever he's there, he seems to know everybody in farm, and if he doesn't know them, they know him. And I think it's that very special friendliness that is so appealing about farm, not only the buildings and the facilities and so forth, but it does have a very special atmosphere. And I'm not saying it because I'm in the council chamber in front of all the councillors. I really do feel that. I think, I won't go on forever, but I did think that YouTube was quite extraordinary and showing what you'd done and what you'd achieved through it. And it did strike me that this is very much your success, and you've all come together to make this happen. And you've done so much during COVID with communities and making sure those who are on their own are looked after and protected. And I did join one of Ian's LRF meetings, which on Zoom, which was terrific to see, and to see all the different individuals and agencies who were involved. So I would say to all of you, congratulations and well done. There always in these situations has to be a leader, someone who's tracking the whip. And he does it in the nicest possible way, but I do think that Ian Lynch has been quite outstanding in what he's achieved for you and with you. And the very fact that he was up for town clerk of the country says it all in itself. But anyway, all I have to say is I'm delighted to be with you tonight. It's such a special evening for Farnham. So I'm delighted to present you with this gleaming trophy, Mr. Mayor. Comes with congratulations from Surrey and indeed the country. They may not all say well done, Farnham, but I'm sure it's in their times. But as president of Surrey Association of Local Councils and Board of Towns, I have great pleasure in presenting you with your very well-earned trophy.
And I must add that this is not just for the council, it's for the community of Farnham. So, community of Farnham, well done for all that you've done. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
As I can't vote, I'm going to skip that.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll wait for the town clerk to come back. Town clerk, have we got any apologies?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have apologies from Deputy Mayor, Councillor Hess, Councillor Fraser and Councillor Edmonds.
And town clerk, any disclosures of interest?
So I believe that Councillor Beeman has a disclosure of interest if we discuss the Hale Recreation Ground, and Councillor Merrill whether as a portfolio holder of assets at Waveney Borough Council. Is Councillor Martin, inadvertently, your role as a county councillor was missed off the front of the agenda, for which I apologise. But as a triple-hatted councillor, Councillor Merriweather's interest as a county councillor is also declared.
Martin. Minutes of the last meeting. You've all received a copy of the minutes of the last meeting. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I'll sign those later. Questions and statements by the public. Town clerk, have we got any questions by the public?
None formally received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. That brings me then to town mayor's announcements. So I've got another presentation to make. You've probably seen it reported in the paper that 2021-22 celebrates the 25th anniversary of the Green Flag Award, which is the international quality mark for parks and green spaces. I'm happy to announce that Gostrey Meadow has been awarded the Green Flag for 2021, and a new flagpole in Gostrey Meadow now flies our green flag. And just recently, we got some plaques to put up around Gostrey Meadow in recognition of that Green Flag Award. This is an incredible achievement. So yet another award for Farnham Town Council. So again, well done all the staff of Farnham Town Council and all the volunteers and the community that have contributed to this award. So let's have a round of applause for them both. So we've had a busy October. As you well know, October is Craft Month. And as normally happens, we've had 52 events going on during Craft Month. So it's been a very, very busy October. Also, during October, I attended the inaugural meeting of Surrey Association of Local Council. That was the first meeting since Surrey and Sussex have separated as an association of local councils. So that was a very lovely event. Future events, dates coming up. Remembrance. The November events this year include the school's remembrance on the 12th of November and the main remembrance parade and service at the War Memorial on the 14th. As you will know, the postponed rededication of the War Memorial as it celebrates its centenary and the commemoration of the centenary of the British Legion will take place immediately before the remembrance service, with Bishop Dr. Christopher Herbert leading the rededication. The parade will start in Castle Street, COVID being possible for us to meet in person. So hopefully that will continue. The Christmas preparations are well underway already. So the Christmas lights switch on will be on Saturday, the 20th of November. Christmas carol service with the Farnham Youth Choir will be on Wednesday, the 1st of December. And Farnham Christmas Market will take place on Sunday, the 12th of December. As you well know, it's usual for the mayor to have a Christmas card that is given out to members of Farnham. And this year, I personally commissioned a painting by the artist Susie Lidston of the council offices. So we took a photograph of the council offices with the Christmas tree and the Christmas lights on the council offices. And Susie Lidston painted a picture. As you probably know, Susie is famous for painting buildings in and around Farnham. And we now have one of the council offices, a Christmas scene. So pleased to announce that Susie's here to present the painting to me personally, and I in turn will be donating it to the council for display in the council offices. Thank you. Thank you very much, Susie. Yeah. He's taking center stage. Item 6, questions by members. Town Clerk, how many questions by members?
None received.
Thank you very much. So on to part 1, items for decisions. Working group and panel notes. To receive notes and any recommendations of the following working groups and panels. So can I invite Councillor Dixon to present the report of the community enhancement held on 23rd of September 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did meet, as you say, on the 23rd of September. Unfortunately, we didn't finish the meeting because we had to do some budgetary things which was felt to be too onerous to do after 3 hours of meeting. So we've got a second part of the meeting on the 18th of November. But we did manage to do quite a lot during the meeting. Most of it's in the minutes. one of the things which I was particularly interested in was we had a presentation by the Plastic Free organisation. And there's some new legislation going through, which may mean that in future all plastic bottles will be recycled. It's quite an ambitious scheme. It does mean that every plastic bottle in the country will be numbered, so that when the manufacturers make them, they have to be able to account for them and take them back. It's going to really be a step change in how we deal with plastic. And I'm hoping that it'll be as successful as getting rid of plastic bags from supermarkets were. So that was very interesting. But the only recommendation we have got for this committee is to do with the phone box on West Street. And the recommendation is that the phone box on West Street will be used as a culture box, and that the initial use be used to celebrate Farnham sporting heroes. And we hope that the Farnham Sports Council will help with that. So I hope the council will agree to that recommendation.
So council, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Tourism and Events meeting held on the 12th of October 2021, and I would ask Councillor Evans to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a busy time, as you've identified yourself, and this is the working committee behind so many of the events which are occurring. We had a presentation at the beginning of the meeting from the Visitors Forum, and they are changing their modus operandi, and they will now be meeting twice a year, as opposed to, I think, bi-monthly before. So we support them as a council, and we look forward to these developments. There are no recommendations from this working group, but everything is well minuted, and I don't intend to go through the minutes. The recent events are listed there. Farmers Market, we are shortly to have a meeting here with the market operators, which we do once a year. West Street Market has taken place since this meeting. The Food Festival had already taken place, and I just must say, yes, it was remarkable. I think we had many thousands of people who actually enjoyed bringing their dogs with them. So future events and projects, again, are all listed there, and they all rest with the events manager to progress. A very busy job, which he does remarkably well, and he's got a very busy time ahead with him with the Christmas events coming along. I'd like to bring your attention to the Book and Literary Festival, which definitely is scheduled in March of next year. I think the way it's progressing is volunteers who are forming a steering group who are providing the information and the background for this. We had a meeting this week, and it really does look very good, and it's coming on very well. I don't think there's anything else I need to bring to your attention. So this is merely to receive these minutes, as there are no recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Martin.
I just would like to say a few things. I would like to thank Oliver Cluskey and his team here for so successfully organising the snow windows being put up this week for all the retailers in Farnham. There's some lovely windows ranging from penguins to squirrels and lovely snow scenes. The Farnham retailers greatly appreciate all the effort and organisation by Oliver and all the rest of the team at Farnham here. Everyone should go and have a look at them. They are absolutely beautiful, and the amount of work Tom's put into them is brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Moving on then. So is that agreed that we accept the notes of the meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Next item is the notes of the meeting of Strategy and Finance held on the 19th of October 2021, and I invite Councillor Neil to present those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. I'll go through the notes here for you. You've received some of the more detailed papers, and I'm sure you will have had a look at those. The finance report. The main points coming out on the finance report is that we've had a conclusion of the external audit. There were no matters raised, so we're fine on that count. There is an audit report on our website if anyone wishes to view it there. The trial balance at the end of September is fine. Income and expenditure is broadly in line with budgeted income at this point in the year, so that's fine as well. Debtors, no particular concerns about any current debtors. Investments statements are available, that's all in hand. On the coronavirus support fund, there's been a proposal to rename it as the Farnham Support Fund now that we're moving out of hopefully the coronavirus pandemic, and we wish to keep the fund going. So there's an increase suggested for to be able to take from £350 as opposed to £300 from that fund as a grant, and in exceptional cases to extend it to £500. And moving on to the Recklesham Community Centre, they have been somewhat stretched in terms of income during the pandemic. So they requested an option to waive the rent to a certain extent, and it was proposed in our meeting, all supporting that there is a rent waiver of £1,500. Those are the main points of the meeting, and there are some recommendations, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
So we'll take the recommendations one at a time. So recommendation 1, it's recommended that the conclusion of the unqualified external audit of the 2020-21 accounts be welcomed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Second recommendation, it's recommended that the update on the finances at the 6-month period be agreed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Recommendation 3, it's recommended that the Farnham Coronavirus Support Fund be renamed the Farnham Support Fund, and the amount that can be requested be increased from £300 to £350, with the possibility of making a grant of up to £500 in exceptional circumstances. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And finally, it is recommended that a rent waiver of £1,500 be agreed for Recklesham Community Centre. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, councillors. Over to you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the grants review. Councillors will be aware that we've had a grants review undertaken by Wendy Varco, MBE. She has produced a report, it's been circulated, and it's broadly supportive of how we go about the business of allocating grants. She did make some recommendations, they're listed in the report in front of you. I won't go through all those now. We have sent around a note encouraging councillors to encourage any community groups to apply for grants in the next session. So that's with councillors here to progress, please. And there are some recommendations for council on this item, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 recommendations, take them one at a time. Number 1, the response of the Strategy and Finance Working Group the recommendations of the grants review be agreed. Is that agreed, councillors? And second one, councillors encourage community groups to apply for the community grants. Is that agreed, councillors? Thank you very much. Back to you, councillor Neil.
Okay, I'll move on to item 6, contracts and assets update. So this has been reviewed in the working group, and the main points I'll just list for you here. The West Street Cemetery gates, they're quite a challenge technically. They've been there a long time. They're well embedded, and it's cost us quite a lot to have them removed and surveyed and to take the progress from there. There are some extra costs likely which are going to come forward in the recommendation. The central car park toilet refurbishment has also been quite a challenge. We initially agreed an earmarked reserve of £90,000 to cover this, and it needs to extend, having done further investigation, probably to reserve level of £160,000. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be that much, but due to certain things that we've added in that during the project that need looking at, and also the rising costs of doing the work that have been coming through over the last few months, we expect the cost for that work to be somewhat higher. There was also a consideration of creating a changing places toilet. I'm not exactly sure of the details of that, but I believe it takes quite a lot of space, and the committee decided not to progress that item. Moving on to Gostree Meadow. As you can see, we have got the Green Flag Award there. And in relation to Gostree Meadow, there'll be a further meeting with the Ridgeway School in November to look again at the further proposals coming through for a cafe, potential cafe in the meadow. Tree inspections, that is something which we have to do every 5 years, and we have received a quotation for that of £7,000. Nursery greenhouse, as you know, that we have to replace the greenhouse. It's been taking some time to sort out the asbestos in it, and we're still progressing the work that needs to be done on that. Contract renewals, there's a lot of discussion going on about the cleaning contract and the IT support contract. Sometimes a slightly difficult conversation with Waverley on that, I understand. The Hale Recreation Ground, the town clerk has received correspondence from the Recreation Ground Committee with a view to us taking over the running of the recreation ground from Waverley Borough Council. There's further work to be done on this because there's some quite complicated aspects relating to the cost of maintaining the grass cutting in particular, because there's 2 levels of grass cutting that we need to do there, which we don't currently have facilities or the facilities to do at the moment. So there's some ongoing work on there. So out of that, Mr. Mayor, comes another set of recommendations, please.
So we'll take these one at a time. So number 1, the Victoria Road Central Car Park Public Convenience Refurbishment set out be progressed, and earmarked budget approved for the project be increased to £160,000. Is that agreed, councillors? Second recommendation, the town clerk be authorised to accept the most economically advantageous tender for the public convenience refurbishments and undertake any necessary post-tender negotiations and issue a letter of interest to the successful contractor, subject to a further report on funding. Is that agreed, councillors? Agreed. Item 3, town clerk be authorised to accept the most economically advantageous tender for West Street Cemetery gates undertake any necessary post-tender negotiations, and issue a letter of intent to the successful contractor, subject to a further report on funding. Is that agreed, councillors?
Agreed.
Item 4, the councillor oversee the tender opening ceremony for the bids for both the West Street gates and central car park toilets on 25th of November at 1:30 p.m. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. The town clerk be authorised to award the quinquennial tree survey to the most economically advantageous tender with an earmarked budget of £7,000. Councillors, is that agreed?
Agreed.
And finally, the town clerk continue discussions with Waverley Borough Council and the Howell Recreation Ground Management Committee regarding the potential transfer of ownership to Farnham Town Council. Councillor Murray.
Sorry, I'd love to vote for this. I just need to ask the town clerk's guidance if I need to declare an interest and should abstain as PFH
You
worker.
should declare an interest because it will come to you eventually as portfolio holder.
Very good. Okay, so I'm declaring an interest. Can I still vote for it if I want to?
No.
No. Okay. Okay, I'm stumm. So you better.
Councillors, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Back to you. Oh, sorry. Councillor Dunsmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not disputing anything that's just been agreed. I just wanted to raise one thing. Was mentioned, Councillor Neil, about changing places, toilet facility. I just would like to raise that with all the Waverley councillors here that they should be putting this forward to the Waverley officers to be part of the Brightwells development. It's a perfect location. It's absolutely the right place where it should be. And it wouldn't be in the public conveniences in the central car park. It needs to be heated. It needs to be in a safe, nice location. And even though Councillor Neil didn't know what it is, this is facilities for older people. We have changing facilities for young persons. This is something so that older people don't have to go home when they're enjoying themselves. And every town should have that facility, and Waverley need to be putting that in. I just wanted to say thank you.
Yep, town clerk.
Just to add to what Councillor Dunsmore said, it's also for people with multiple disability needs as well, and so it's to assist in the more complex needs as well. And as said, definitely needs to be a supervised environment if possible for convenience.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to item 7, which is the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. There have been quite a number of activities here which I want to just update you on, which are not necessarily covered at the time that we had this strategy and finance meeting. So I'll go through a number of points in summarise for you. As it says in the notes here, the final version of the optimised infrastructure plan was agreed by the Farnham board at the last meeting. Although it says it's a final version, somehow the plan will evolve as the project progresses, either under the same name or maybe some other document, I don't know. So it's going to be an active plan, I'm sure, as the programme progresses. Now, on the 20th of October, there was a workshop in UCA. This was originally proposed as a seminar for the Farnham board with the team, which would then be followed by a workshop for the Farnham councillors. But instead, we had the workshop, which I'm sure was useful, even though some of it was revisiting previous ground that has been covered. So those of you who went to that, you had an opportunity to express your thoughts on all the key aspects in the town centre, and the programme team is going to come back with a summary of that to us in due course. So because of the way that one fell out, I'm now trying to arrange a seminar specifically for the town council members with the team, to which we will invite Councillor Oliver, MP Jeremy Hunt, and Senior Officer Katie Stewart. The aim is to have a wider discussion covering climate change impacts and the Surrey County Council plans for the new transport plan version 4, and I hope this will be before Christmas. So it will give us an opportunity to get the wider picture from these people, and obviously also we will be able to relate it to what we're doing on the infrastructure programme itself. Any questions that you want to raise with them, that would be welcome. Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say I did go to the workshop. It's not working, I'm afraid, Town Clerk. It's oh, it is now. It is now. Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. I did go to the workshop, and I thought it was a very good, very productive session. Possibly one that we could have used maybe a year or two ago, frankly. But I'm glad it happened. I was a bit disappointed that the definition of the town centre, I realised it was town centre focused, but I was surprised the town centre doesn't extend to the museum or UCA to the west, or to the hospital to the east. So I don't think I was the only person to be slightly disappointed at that. But I do look forward to the Surrey, the team, digesting and responding to everything that was tabled, and I hope they don't curate the outcome too much.
Councillor Neil, back to you.
Play on these buttons at the moment. Yes, thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Yeah, I think we're all perhaps a little bit concerned that the team is not engaging with us quite as much as we would like. So we sometimes get some of these things happen that we haven't had an influence on the agenda, perhaps, and we're not quite sure what's going to come along. So this makes it slightly difficult for us to form a council view here on what they're doing, because we don't really know enough about some of the technical issues that relate to what they're putting together and the various pros and cons. In particular, I would say there's all sorts of options on the town centre, you know, possibly we need some sort of roadmap going forward to whichever form of pedestrian system comes out of it. And we need to remind them, as we have, that we have already produced some key policy papers, one at the very beginning, which was called Key Objectives, and a second one more recently this year, which was the response to the draft OIP that came out at the beginning of the year. So we need to be sure that they are keeping those in focus. One of the other things that they haven't come back to us on, that's mentioned in those papers, is any factors relating to the proposed Hart Link Road that we put in front of them. We were expecting a response on technicalities and the feasibility of that, but they haven't come back on that yet. We also want more information on any technical proposals relating to the North Farnham issues that would affect what we are thinking about in the town centre. So we need more response on that one as well. And of course, the wider MRN aspects, we also need more feedback on how they're getting on, what they're thinking on the A31 proposals, Reckersham bypass, potential Western Link. And of course, they are expecting to put in an application to central government in November, and we haven't really been briefed on that yet. So all those are factors which I think we would probably all want to hear more from, and we will be progressing, those of us at the Farnham Board, for a little bit more visibility on what's happening there. I'll go on with a few more points and then invite you to comment on that, if I may, at the end. Next point that I've got down here. Yes, obviously, we also want to be sure that we have a proper engagement with the community before some of these key decisions are arrived at, because if the county or the programme team, come up with ideas that are too consolidated before they have engaged with us and us with the community, that is not really appropriate either, I don't think. Now, last week, there was a local liaison forum. I think some of us felt that we and also the public, as in the paper today, felt that perhaps there wasn't enough explanation coming through on that meeting from the team. That's mentioned in the paper in one of the letters today. So maybe we need to look again at the local liaison forum for the next meeting. Perhaps this one was not quite as open and as forthcoming as the previous ones have been. The HGV project is now in place. It probably needs checking out. Anyone who wants to feed in ideas that they've seen from their end of the world would be useful. I think there's probably some anomalies there in terms of the signposting, but nevertheless, the anecdotal feedback coming back is that it is having an impact, a positive impact, and reducing the HGV traffic in the town centre, and indeed reducing the HGV traffic in the Upper Hale Road area, which are the outcomes we were looking for. There's further consultation on the 20-mile-an-hour zone going ahead, especially on the town centre and the Castle Street aspect. Some members here have given views on that. I would perhaps propose that we put these together in a paper to strengthen the consolidated town council view. This was discussed in the last council meeting, I believe. So perhaps we could consider a recommendation there in a minute. And it might need to be something which the leader and the town clerk put together on behalf of council. Perhaps we'll come back to that. On the Castle Street thing, there have been proposals to extend the 20-mile-an-hour zone from the top of Castle Street, maybe up Castle Hill to some appropriate point further up, which would slow the traffic down into what is quite a dangerous area, Castle Hill anyway, if the traffic is going anything over the limit at the moment. And we're also concerned about the build-outs that were proposed at the top of Castle Street. And there are further ideas about a trial on carriageway narrowing for the rest of Castle Street, because there's the support in various areas for trialing a cafe culture at the bottom end of the street in particular. So there's a number of aspects there which there has been some feedback so far, and as I say, it might be a useful idea to have a consolidated view from the town council on that. So does anyone want to comment on any of those topics that I've just brought up there, please?
Councillor Beeman.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to get things right for farmers, as far as I'm concerned. And yet I do not understand why everybody is turning their backs on the Great Western Leaford Road link, because that has always been pointed out in previous surveys. That is the main answer to the solution of our problems in farming. And one thing does concern me a little bit is that, am I right in thinking the next board meeting is in January? Is that correct? Earlier than that, but is it before the November submission to the DTP or not? Yeah. So in other words, they're going to go to the DTP with the submission before the A31 before they come to a board meeting. Well, Austin Charles, in one board seems worse.
Town clerk.
I'll just clarify the stages for submission. This is what's known as a strategic outline business case to have the concept on the table, and then there'll be further development of concept with public consultation prior to a more formal submission going through. We're talking about a two to 3 year timescale for the actual submissions to go through the system.
But that submission is just A31, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's what amazed me, because in our live meeting, as far as I remember, correctly, they said that they were going to do that, but Lancashire, where we want to call it, the Western Street Road, that to go through another appraisal because of transport decarbonisation proposals. Yet the same measures are not taken against the A31 proposal. It seems illogical to me. And I think it's an asset. This is the first real opportunity with real money that we've had to get this situation right for Farnham. I think it's, well, thrown away basically. And words cannot speak loud enough or strong enough, I think, to get this right now. And I would urge us to I mean, at the end of the day, okay. So who is paying for these consultants other than the sort of council taxpayers of Farnham? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But I mean, I'm really quite upset about it, and I think it's time we really stomp our foot down, stomp on.
Councillor Dixon, followed by Councillor Miller.
Yes, I agree what Councillor Bierman says. What's quite surprising is in this latest October version of the plan is that the Western Bypass has made a reappearance. Because when we were having meetings in the summer, when we had all the public consultation meetings, when it was the previous team, it was made quite clear to us that there was be no Western Bypass at all, because they said the government would never build a bypass unless there was economic development alongside it, which probably mean more houses and more businesses. And so actually in the latest version of the document, it has made a reappearance, which I was surprised about. But it has been very frustrating. That's never been a consideration at all, really. And I think what's alarming as well is it started off as a review of Hinckley's Corner, and now that because of the cost of cement, supposedly, and the environmental impact of creating the cement, they're not going to have a solution for Hinckley's Corner for quite a while. So it does seem to be, we've got to a strange place at the moment.
Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to pick up on something Councillor Beeman said, because his description of some of the this sort of topsy-turvy approach also applies to funding. The OIP that was published in October makes it very clear that the funding isn't secured for this. And in actual fact, on page 6, it describes how a position paper on funding is currently being produced. So I wouldn't even dare to suggest there's real money here. Even the money that's been earmarked by Surrey, according to Surrey's own budget, is largely borrowed or going to be financed by capital receipts from asset sales, and we've got no idea what assets they're planning to hog to pay for this.
Councillor Neal.
Okay, well, thank you for those inputs, and they're all noted. We will continue to press on these items. As you say, they're in the OIP. None of these schemes have been dismissed, and it's for us to keep pressing on them until we get some output from the team as to what they are really proposing. I'm assured that they haven't written anything off yet, but there are clearly complications in terms of road building, where they have to take note of what's coming down from central government. But as members have expressed, there are still pros and cons about the benefits, not only the cost of building it, but the economic benefits of having these projects in place, and all the impacts that we're trying to reduce by having these, the Ecclesham Bypass, possibly the Western Bypass, and whatever upgrades are going to come on the A31. So we will keep pressing on those items and make sure that they are not removed from the table without us being consulted. I'll move on. So can we have a recommendation to put a paper forward for the 20-mile-an-hour zone incorporated with what we think might happen on Castle Street, bring it all together? That's what I would propose. Do I have a seconder to do that, please?
Can I don't want to complicate this much more. I'm very happy to second that, as long as we're contemplating actually putting Webber and Badgeley on the map this time. Oh, I'm sorry.
Town Clerk.
Yeah, I think we don't have a formal recommendation on the table yet, but I suggest it's something along the lines that the town clerk responds to the 20 miles an hour consultation along the lines previously agreed in Farnham Town Council's response to the short and medium term interventions, because that picked up the issue about the build outs, it picked up the issue about the extension of the zone in Castle Street, and it also picked up the point that, the other 20, apart from Castle Street, the other 20-mile-an-hour zones seem to be broadly accepted, and there was the encouragement to have 20-mile-an-hour zones in these around schools and the approaches to schools, and then it would also pick up the point that Councillor Merriweather just said about Bashop needing some attention. So if that sort of proposal would be what you're thinking of, then we can prepare a response accordingly.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually indicated before the town clerk did his clarification, I couldn't possibly support the first recommendation. Well, I don't think it was a recommendation at all. I think one of the issues, and Councillor Beeman's articulated, Councillor Dix and Councillor Merriweather, is just the lack of detail and then the lack of determination from our part to get our detail into the mix, if you like. And it's my frustration right from the start that at the board meetings, and I've watched a few, there is no fight for Farnham and what Farnham wants at those board meetings. You know, there's just a sort of repetition of something that somebody's done, and then we move on. And so if we are going to have a recommendation, certainly I would only support it with all the town clerk's clarifications, because what's happening at the moment, everything is so vague that things can be slipped in that then work against something else that we're planning to achieve. And you know, I just find this whole project so disappointing, having supported it 100% at the start and being told that this was, you know, the town council working in full partnership with the borough and the town, the borough and the county. I'm sorry, I just don't see it at all. I just don't think what we say seems to get through. We get it the other way around. We're told what they eventually thinking. But actually, at the last LLF, I thought the consultants looked bored, ill-informed, or both. And really, it livened up a little bit at the end when we got on to the Wrecclesham bypass and the possibility of Relief Road. And we got all the trotted out responses. And my response is, if you don't like the policy, you know, tackle the government, get them to change it, don't just roll over. And I think all the way through here, we're bending over because government says this or because somebody else says that. Well, you know, as Councillor Beeman said, this is our one chance in a lifetime. And if we're just going to roll over and end up with something wishy-washy or counterproductive at worst, I just think it's, I think you used the phrase, Councillor Beeman, a wasted opportunity. So I will support a recommendation. I don't like recommendations coming sort of straight off the page, as it were. I'd like to be able to read what they are, but it has to be a firm recommendation, not a recommendation that says, well, we'll wait and see what they suggest, and then if it's good enough, we'll support it. I'm not having any more of that. That's what we've had from the start of this project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me a little rant.
Thank you for your rant, Councillor Coburn. Can I ask the town clerk to read out the recommendation again, please?
But it's clarified, there's only about 20-mile-an-hour zone consultation. It's not about the other matters on the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. Town clerk is authorised to respond to the 20 miles an hour zone consultation along the lines previously agreed in response to the short to medium term interventions paper, which is agreed at the last council, and it covers points I mentioned. And this is changes which members wish to add.
That was in the one, yeah, that's already there.
Okay, councillors, is that agreed?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, does that include, because one of the things that would be, I know, sorry, I'm just going to digress a minute, but Councillor Neil spoke about the signs that Surrey have put up about the HGVs, and they really are quite egregious. As you know, I live in North Farnham, and every day I walk my dog to the park. I walk from my house along some very windy lanes, leading Heath Lane. Now, Heath Lane is sort of like a road which is very rough. It's only you can get one car parked, and lots of cars parked around it. There's no pavements. And then there's another little road, and it's got no pavements. It's car park, and you can only get one car through. And everyone has to be very polite to let each other through, and it's very nice. And at the end of this road, with no pavements and one car, there's a big sign that says HGVs can drive along this. Now, I have a great deal of problems trying to figure out where the HGVs are coming from. Presumably, they're going to go down to Alma Lane and then turn into a little tiny road which zigzags like this. There was no pavements, there was all parked cars, there's only one car passable, and then they're going to turn a hard right, not even 90 degrees, more than 90 degrees right, down another tiny road to get to the end, and then realise they can't go onto Upper Hill Road. The signs are completely rigorous. That no HGV sign should not be at the end of a tiny road, but it should be at the top at Alma Lane, stopping, because the thoughts that a lorry might turn down there is just quite peculiar apart from anything else. And they've put all these, so it just sort of like, you say, okay, great. So I think one of the things I'd like to say about the 20 mile per hour zone is I think this is in the short and medium day plan, because we mentioned it last time, is it'd be great to have 20 miles per hour in all the residential areas. So particularly in the big residential areas where lots of people living, and I think it is in our previous document. It isn't.
No, the debate, if I may just clarify that, my understanding that members can come up with a different response if you disagree, but the response that went off on the short and medium term interventions was that 20 mile an hour zone should be targeted, not blanket one, to have the most effect, and that the council's preference was that they should be in and around the approach roads to schools in particular. And then there are some particular zones that were identified in the consultation, which are slightly broader. And so that's how we recorded the debate at the last meeting.
Thank you. So is that recommendation agreed? Town Clerk?
It would just help in terms of the HGV points that Councillor Dixon raised. There have been pressure has been put on the Highways Agency to finalise the signs, particularly one on the M3, which will assist further in the reduction of vehicles actually coming off the M3. And I did ask on your behalf if there could be a review of the signage once the scheme is fully implemented to ensure that everything is in the right place. So you could actually ask for that for me to write that formally if you wish as an extra recommendation, but I have already asked that question.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 8, Local Transport Plan 4. Now, I produced a discussion paper on this some time ago now, which you will have seen, and that was followed by a more detailed draft formal response, which has been circulated as well, and that was discussed in the last strategy and finance meeting. So the update of that is now with you, having taken in some comments from councillors that I've received over the last few days. I noticed that Councillor Merriweather was observing an interest in e-scooter trials. Do you want to make a comment on that, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. I spent some time in London a couple of weeks ago and was thrilled to test the scheme that's going on in central London, being operated by 3 different companies. And I was very impressed with the technology that goes with the scooter, as well as the precautions being taken in conjunction with the police as to who can and can't rent these scooters. So you have to have a driving license, which is vetted before you can even sign on to the app. So a lot of the concerns that spring to mind seem to have been anticipated. We wouldn't be reinventing a wheel. And in actual fact, Councillor Atfield has also reminded me that a scheme operates in the Isle of Wight. And also, I think there's one, I think it's Hemel Hempstead, which is sponsored by Camelot, the lottery company as well. So, you know, there are plenty of places that are trialing this. And in a town, you know, like ours, particularly when we have, you know, clear paths like the station to the UCA. I'm not suggesting it will be the best way to get to the hospital, but, you know, there do seem to be some routes that would be quite attractive for us to trial this sort of thing. It would be nice to be on the cutting edge, or to remain on the cutting edge, keep on the cutting edge of these things.
Thank you. Well, Surrey have always told us that they'd like us to be upfront on this programme. If councillors are supportive of what Councillor Merriweather has just said, and that they'd like us to be supportive of e-scooter trials along the basis of what's happening nationally, which is quite well protected in safety aspects, as I understand as well. So we could add in that to the paper. It's not in the paper at the moment, if councillors are so minded. I would like to recommend, Town Clerk, if you can come up with the right words for me, that this paper is submitted as the Town Council's formal response to the local transport plan proposals, subject to any further comments that there might be here now. So, and this is fairly urgent, so it would be useful if we can do that directly under the Town Clerk's assistance here.
So I think, councillors, what you're saying is the draft Farnham Town Council response to LDP 4 be submitted. I think you can say it as simple as that, unless there's any changes, including the one about offering to be a trial for the scooters, if you wanted to add it onto. I'm not sure if it's in the paper at the moment, so that could then potentially be added. That's what members feel is appropriate.
Councillors, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next subject is Museum of Farnham.
Leader, would it be appropriate for me to leave? I've got to say, if I do comment any more on this, it will be as the Farnham Town Councillor. I will not comment this evening at all as a Western councillor, but I will leave with it. I'm going to go and get a coffee. How about that?
Do I have to go? Because it comes under my
crikey,
remit
yeah,
of the
I think you do.
museum, I'm afraid. It's under as an executive
sugar?
portfolio holder.
Milk and sugar?
Yes, so if you have executive portfolio holder responsibilities in another place, then you should leave for this discussion and leave it so that the Town Council believes it's Councillor Martin is on the executive, Councillor Cloud, but they don't have executive responsibility. Sorry, okay. So the other two have direct responsibility. So yes, I think that's.
Thank you. So over to you.
Okay, Museum of Farnham. You'll have seen the notes in the papers here. Now we've been trying to get involved with the Museum of Farnham matters for about a year, actually. There was some response saying that they would involve us, but it hasn't happened till recently. We had a meeting a few weeks ago here where all the relevant members from Waverley came here, including the Chief Executive. And so we had quite a constructive discussion there to kick the whole thing off. So what we are now faced with is trying to come up with a town council's view, or indeed get ourselves involved with the Waverley in how this process goes forward, to try and find a solution for both the renovation of Wilmer House and its future, and the situation regarding the museum for the future, be it in Wilmer House or indeed maybe somewhere else. So there's a whole load of discussion there needed. It's quite complicated. There's a number of issues that relate to it, and it's because of that that when we were invited just to say what the town council would want to do, which was almost an invitation to purchase it or to take it over, we said, well, we really wanted to participate in a wider discussion, understand the issues as Waverley would put them to us, and be part of that discussion rather than trying to form an independent view just on our own basis here. So that's where we are at the moment, and I think that is the principle of how we're going to progress at the moment. What else is there to say on that? Oh yes, we're waiting now for some papers to come from Waverley, giving us more input on what's been happening recently, the investigation, the costing, and all the surveying that's been going on, so that we can consider our position there. At the same time, we took a view in strategy and finance that it would be sensible for the town council here to have a small task group that would be the people that would participate in this involvement. So we're talking about forming a task group here to consider the museum aspects, and that task group would be the people who would get involved with Waverley on an ongoing discussion as to how we progress matters. And of course, we also want to see some external stakeholders like the Farnham Moorings organisation brought into it more directly as well, and any other stakeholders that we know of that could have a useful input to the whole subject. So that is where we are at the moment. There's a recommendation there, two recommendations there, but I'll take questions from any other councillors on that first.
So I'll have Councillor Coburn followed by Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I mean, there was a very strong feeling at the Strategy and Finance that this is Waverley's problem, and we should not be putting in vast amounts of resources to solve their problem. And to begin with, some people, I can't remember who, fortunately, wanted us to sort of have the group and basically, take over the discussions. And Councillor Atfield, who can't back me up tonight, but definitely was very much of the view no. And if we were to have a task group, it would just be a task group that would, attend. But basically, the impetus has to come from Waverley. It's a Waverley issue. And we are spending vast quantities of money, it seems to me, not on this, but in certain ways that really are not our responsibility. So I think it was made very clear that they would, the group would be subservient to anything that Waverley was doing on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Martin.
Sorry, before going any further forward on this, I think we've got to look at the bottom line, how much of this is going to cost. We haven't got any details, and I got a feeling it's going to be a lot of money. So I think we should sit back and let Waverley sort this out. It's their mess, nothing to do with Farnham Town Council. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
I was at that meeting, and the minuting in our last minutes said papers following the meeting were expected. My memory, but perhaps the town clerk could agree or disagree, was that the leader of Waverley said that those papers would be with us by the end of the week. And I think there was some comment that we had waited before for papers to come. I'm not aware that those papers have been received, but perhaps the town clerk could update us.
Town clerk.
So there have been some papers that were sent, which we've seen previously. The papers, particularly that we're expecting that have still not received, relate to the appointment of consultants and the piece of work that they're being asked to undertake now, to look at the nature of the museum service and whether it can be separated from the building. That's my understanding of what the piece of work that's now being undertaken is all about. When we met, they were interviewing consultants, and I think they have now appointed a successful contractor, but I don't know if the papers have actually been signed and are therefore ready for circulation, but I haven't seen them.
Councillor Neil.
Thank you. Well, responding to Councillor Martin, I don't, and maybe Councillor Coburn as well, I don't think that we have ever tried to take over responsibility of this or to say that we want to sort the problem out. The proposals that I've always been involved in have always said we want to be part of the Waverley discussion at some stage so that we can include the town council's views on what is coming out, because at the end of the day, this is an important piece of the public realm here. We are very close to the community, and we feel that, you know, if they don't manage to secure a solution to it, then we will be exposed as well as Waverley. So I would propose, and I think this is what the Strategy and Finance group recommended, was that we do engage into their activity, but not try to take it over, or indeed to take over the responsibilities for it. So that is a conclusion I think we've reached, and that is why there's a recommendation here for us to put together a group of people who would be the people who operate on behalf of the town council here, and hopefully be involved in any further meetings with Waverley on this.
Councillor Coburn.
Sorry to come back, Mr. Mayor, but I do feel very strongly that, you know, we're again using words that don't really tell the whole story. I mean, we all know the situation with the house. We know how much it's going to cost, sort of upwards of 2 million to put that house back into anything like a reasonable shape. We also know that neither the town council nor the borough council happens to have that £2 million in their back pocket. So, you know, we have to be realistic about this. And as I say, it's Waverley's issue. They have to sort out what they're going to do with the asset, or that is the house, and also the service, which is the museum. And whatever we put in, you know, it would just be, I don't know, I personally, I think it would be a waste of our resources, because it's an issue that is a very simple issue, but it just means that the answers are going to be difficult, because, you know, people associate the museum with the building, but, you know, the truth will have to dawn eventually that we cannot maintain the museum in that building as it is, and whatever happens, it's got to be a temporary move, even if it doesn't end up being a permanent move. And neither Waverley nor Surrey tell us what they're doing with the assets within the town. You know, we've had all this over the neighbourhood plan. We've put in assets that they told us were available, and then 2 years down the line, and all of a sudden they're not. So, you know, it's not as though with these assets we have a good working relationship with them, and a lot of proof that they are working with us to get, you know, an answer that suits everybody. Getting an answer that suits them, that's a different matter. So personally, I don't even support a working group sort of taking part at all. I really do think over this matter, we support the service, that's a different matter altogether. But I think it's up to Waverley to work out where that service goes and what they do with that beautiful property, which, you know, was presumably originally a beautiful house.
Councillor Dixon.
Yes, I can, the amounts of money involved are not quite 2 million, at least I don't think so, but it could be that much, I suppose. And we don't, none of us really know, but I gather it's not, probably not 2 million. It is a lot of money. I do worry about what Councillor Coburn is saying, because This is a grade 1 listed building, which at the moment belongs to the public. It belongs to the public. It is, belongs to Waverley Borough Council. And but it's located in Farnham. And, it's bad enough that it's been sitting there for several years with the cladding and all the stuff around it. But what you seem to be saying is that leave it to Waverley. And if Waverley decide to sell it and make it a private house, well, then, or sell it to, a developer of some sort, then that's, out of our hands. But surely I think that's actually flies in the face of what I've seen in Waverley, because I've been to a few meetings there, where there's a lot of our Farnham councillors who are on Waverley who are fighting very hard to make sure that Waverley does the right thing and to maintain this building in public ownership and also maintains the museum collection there. And so I don't think we as Farnham Town Council can just step back and so wash our hands off it. We have to support that action, which is being, undertaken by members of this committee on our behalf at Waverley. Does not anyone else think that?
Okay, I think we've had enough on this. So in view of what I've heard, I think we'll need a show of hands for these recommendations. So first recommendation, a Farnham Museum Task Group be created to work alongside Waverley Borough Council, the Farnham Maltings and other interested parties to support Waverley in managing the challenges around restoring Wilmer House and the future of the museum. Oh, sorry.
Maybe it's easier for everyone, instead of saying managing the challenges, is looking into the challenges. But that goes down better with people, because managing takes on responsibility, I feel, as a word. Looking into the challenges, Farnham Town Council does not take on responsibility.
So do you agree to that change to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Okay, so with that change to that, can I have a show of hands if you agree? If you're against,
This is we're doing votes against item count. So
those in favour. And those against? 1. And abstentions? 1, 2. So that is agreed. And the second recommendation, the task group should include the lead member for Tourism Events Working Group, Councillor Hess as a ward member, and the town clerk. If that's agreed, please show hands. Yep. And those against? 1. And abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, that's agreed. Back to you, Councillor Neil. Oh, yeah. Wait for them to come back here. Yes, we'll just wait for the 2 councillors to come back.
You've got 10 meetings to attend tomorrow.
Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you, councillors. So I'm going to go on to item 10, reports from the task groups. The Riverside Sculpture Task Group, the note says there that Jenny de Kerven has, there's a brief has been prepared, so that is progressing. The Cultural Projects Task Group, the town clerk has advised there is a draft report ready, and that will be made to the task group as soon as a date has been identified. There are two more items which I think I would add, if that's okay, from the infrastructure planning group, whatever we call it. What was that about? Oh yes, as you'll have seen in the paper today, there's been more discussion about the neighbourhood plan and a move by Councillor Coburn, probably led, to try and get the protection of the neighbourhood plan increased from 2 to 5 years, which is a government initiative. So, and I think maybe if we support that, we could also support that we engage with the NALC, National Association of Local Councils, to see if we can get their support in making this a more national issue. So I think we could have a resolution there. Maybe, Town Clerk, could you help me on that one, please?
So I think the recommendation would be along the lines of the Farnham Town Council welcomes the focus on extending the protection of neighbourhood plans from 2 to 5 years. Councillor might like to beef this up a little bit and asks now to lobby to afford greater protection for neighbourhood plans.
Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Needless to say, I had to train the MP about this because it's not that easy, but it's neighbourhood plans which allocate sites. It's only those sites that get the 2 years grace. And it's because the sites have been through the LPA and have also been examined in public, and in our case, in the courts as well. And so that is why we think it's a very sound request that the sites, that plans that allocate sites get 5 years to deliver those sites that are in the plan. Because as it stands, with Waverley not having a 5-year housing land supply, national policy kicks in immediately. Well, the neighbourhood plan is 2 years old, but it doesn't apply to all neighbourhood plans. It's only neighbourhood plans that allocate sites. And as you all know, it's in paragraph 14 of the NPPF, which I'm sure you keep by your bedside.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coburn. So with that amendment from Carol Coburn, Town Clerk, read it again.
I've now written it down. So the council welcomes the focus on extended protection on neighbourhood plans which allocate sites from 2 years to 5 years after they are adopted, and also asks now to lobby for this to be become national policy.
Councillors, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Oh, second. Councillor Merrow, that. So is that agreed?
Agreed.
And I think Town Clerk has got a date for the Cultural Projects Task Group.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's the 19th, the afternoon of the 19th of November. And I think Lara Miller is circulating details. But if any councillors particularly want to be there, please let me know.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Okay, there's one more item I'd like to add in here as well, and this is an update on the item we mentioned in the last council meeting, which was the creation of a conservation area task group. Now, we decided that we would do that last meeting, and that means that we now need to have terms of reference for the meeting. There's a lot of pressure at the moment on officer time to prepare for this, so expectation is that we will hold the first meeting of that group in the new year as soon as we can, to give us more time in the busy December time to make the preparations and to brief the people who we would be expecting to participate in that group. I don't think there's any particular recommendation to make out of that, but that's just informative. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I spoke to Jenny after I'd emailed you, Leader, about how the groups were being told that the November F camp was not going to happen. You told me they already knew. Jenny said she hadn't sent anything out. So I just wondered how all these groups knew. Did they know in advance of the decision? I just don't know, but certainly nothing went out after the decision. But we have a November, regular F camp, which they have to be informed about, because obviously it's not going to take place.
Town clerk.
Yes, I spoke to the officer this week, and she will be writing to attendees to set out the next steps, and that will of course include not holding the meeting, which I think is going to be very helpful given all the pressures that have been over planning and related matters. The diary's freed up a little bit. It's just a few days before the civic carol service as well, so I think we could actually do with that extra half a day to get those arrangements all finalised. So the plan will be to organise a new task group meeting early in the new year, probably towards the end of January, early February.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, let's move on to item 11, Boundary Commission review of Waverley. Now, members will know that there is a working group now at Waverley to consider the response to make to the Boundary Commission, and Councillor Ward is chairing that particular working group, I understand. We have discussed this in detail in strategy and finance, and there are a number of points here that we are recommending. I'll just mention them. Basically, the position behind it is that Waverley is proposing to move from 18 councillors to 16 councillors for the Borough Council, covering Farnham, and it's our position in the working group here that we would like to have the same number of councillors for the Town Council here, so that we can mirror the same ward boundaries, and everybody would then know exactly what ward they're in for both authorities going forward. So that does mean that we need to have a view in this council on whether we are prepared also to move from 18 to 16. Now, the recommendations that came out of that discussion were that we would like the town wards to align with the borough wards, that there would be a reduction of town council members from 18, there's a misprint there, by the way, typo, it should say 18 to 16, and it also appears in the recommendations, by the way, 18 to 16, and that would be what we would be investigating here. If possible, it's recommended that we stick to 2-member wards as we have at the moment, which has benefits from managing the work and making sure that the politics is balanced where necessary. There was a lot of discomfort about the Bourne extending to cover right out to Runfold, so we didn't really like that particular part of the proposal, and there was a consideration that the Moore Park name should be retained. We also wished, if we could, in order to get the balance to continue as we have at the moment, to have 8 representatives north and south of the east-west boundary. Now, in practical terms, that can only be achieved if that east-west boundary is adjusted to a certain extent. It is not very easy to adjust it on the western side or in the central sector, but it is for consideration that it could be adjusted from the Shepherd and Flock to the eastern boundary. if we are prepared to do that, then you can move some of the numbers from the northern side, which is the overpopulated side, to the southern side and get the balance needed. It's all a question at the end of the day about getting the right numbers. Members will know that we have to have representation of councillors per voters within a margin of 10%. And that can only be achieved if we somehow move some members from the north, some voters from the north to the south, if we still want to achieve this, balance of 8 members, 16 councillors and 8 wards. And because of all this, we also want to encourage the Borough Council to have a community governance review so that they can work out how we can move in the parish councils from 18 to 16, because that is not a decision that is made by the Boundary Commission. It's a decision that is mainly in the hands of the Borough Council. Now, since we had that meeting, there was a bit more consideration on the numbers. They're available in a spreadsheet, and they show how you could readjust the boundaries if we go along with this proposal to achieve that 8-8 balance. And as I say, it does mean that the only way to do it, if that's what we want as the main achievement, the only way to do it really seems to be to adjust the boundaries of the Webern and Bagshot Lee, and probably splitting them along those 2 communities, and considering how that might merge with the southern area. So I'm sure that Councillor Merriweather and others will want to speak on that point.
I'll have Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Ward, and then Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you. When we first saw the proposals, I phoned as many people as I could in the south of Farnham to see what they thought about it. And I can't tell you because the language was so fruity. Everyone thought the whole thing was a total and utter mess, that they had no idea how Farnham held together, certainly South Farnham. And we did say at Strategy of Finance, we wouldn't touch a hair on the head of Webern and Bagshot Lee.
Thank you.
We made that very clear. But one thing that Councillor Martin came up with was to join further over Riverside, because that does in fact join, the A31 there is not a barrier as it is elsewhere. But this makes absolutely no sense. The boundary of Recklesham cuts off not half of Recklesham, but a fair bit of Recklesham. They've no idea how any of it relates, to make Fairgrove and Shorting this big sort of encompassing double-ended ward, it completely misunderstands how all the south of Farnham holds together and where the traffic goes. It was a complete and utter muddle, and that's the politest way of putting it. I'm sure several people will come up with other suggestions. I'm trying to follow Councillor Martin's. I have a map and I'm trying to draw it around, but it's not just Councillor Martin. I spoke to Rowland and Recklesham, the groups there, the residents, anybody I could find really. And I was walking around the town with my maps, so when Rowland and Recklesham had an open day, I sort of took them there, just so that everyone could have a look at them and see, what they thought. And I didn't come up with anybody who could see that there was any logic to it. So, I think when we put back, I wouldn't like to suggest anything, other than to have a full governance review and to, say that the board should align. I mean, I can understand all of that, but honestly, the rest of it is just absolute rubbish. Doesn't understand where Moore Park is. Why Moore Park has got a name, Moore Park? Why do you think it's called Moore Park? It's not anything we've looked out of the sky, the whole thing is, and the board, it's a parish for goodness sake, Recklesham parish for goodness sake. So I have to say, the frustration having seen what they were planning to do, and I certainly don't think we follow what they did, which is just to fiddle around with numbers and come up with something equally bad, but not quite so silly. But anyway, once again, I really do think we've got to be firm on this, because I don't think this that we were given is anything like the answer to Farnham.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As has already been said, I am chairing the group at Waverley that will be making a recommendation to the executive. So although one might say I should declare an interest, which I will, it is a non-executive position and it has no decision-making powers. So I feel competent to speak here and vote. Let me say that we've canvassed a lot of opinions, and there are some people that believe that the Boundary Commission is sacrosanct, is going to do its own thing, and is not going to pay any attention to any of the inputs that it receives. But there are many others that I've spoken to who believe that, provided, big proviso here, that the borough and the town and the people and the institutions in the town can coalesce with an idea, that we can persuade the Boundary Commission to change its ideas. I liked Carol Coburn's description of the result. It was polite, but very, very direct and very true, I think. I wrote overall considerable disappointment, but I was feeling charitable at the time, I think. They haven't visited the area. They've done a virtual review. And I've really tried very hard to see how this virtual review might have been done, because presumably it was done from the air, either using Google, if I'm allowed to advertise maps, or a helicopter or something. So I did put all these maps down on my conservatory floor, and I did climb a ladder and look down on them. And I thought, well, this is what they've looked at. And looking at that and trying to forget that I knew anything about Farnham, even then I couldn't really see how they'd come up with the areas that they had come up with. They do have an almost obsessive view that the A31 is a total boundary to everything. It's rather like the Berlin Wall, but even then that got knocked down one day. So I think we need to come up with a very strong view. What I feel we need is the rigid A31 boundary in the east. I agree with what Councillor Neil said earlier, is the main cause of the difficulties that then literally, like dominoes, go through the rest of the town. What they were asked for by Waverley is as little disruption as possible, no one-member wards, 2-member wards in all the main settlements. And we did agree that in the country areas, 3-member wards would have been preferable to 2s and 1s. Now, clearly we failed in one thing, because we didn't make the point that the borough and town wards should be identical and coalesce, as we thought it was so obvious it would be a ridiculous statement to make. However, as we learn more about how this process goes, I become, well, I'm fairly immune to strange things that happen in government. But the idea that we have a boundary commission redoing the parliamentary boundaries, overlapping in time with another commission that overdoes the borough boundaries, who I learnt, and I have to say, rarely am I surprised, but at this I was really quite flabbergasted, that they can't do anything about parish boundaries. Yet another authority, the Borough Council, has to adjust the parish boundaries. I mean, what an absolute recipe for disaster. So what do I think should happen? Well, I am absolutely dedicated to the thought that we should have all the areas in the borough and the town as the same. It doesn't make any sense for the electors. It doesn't make any sense for people ringing up their local councillor.
it doesn't make any sense for us as councillors to try and govern it to have different ones. If one takes that, then the next view clearly is that we should have the same number of councillors. So if the borough is reducing to 16 in the town, I think it's a natural corollary if we make the areas the same, that the town reduces to 16. And I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, it may not appeal to everybody, but it does make perfect sense. Moving on, all 2-member wards in Farnham, I think, is very achievable and is highly preferable. It works pretty well at the moment. We've been doing it for a long time. I'm always a little worried about 3-member wards. In any group of 3, there's always the odd one out. And certainly if politically we had 2 in one party and 1 in another, I think it would make difficulties, even though we are a very charitable and friendly bunch. So I think 2-member wards really is what we want. So ward boundaries are the same, 2-member wards, 16 councillors. The odd-shaped wards that they have come up with. I've jotted down in here the open plains of the Bourne and Runfold, where you've got this massive area. I expect John Wayne on his horse to come flying over the end with wheat and cows. I mean, it's a crazy large area. And then what I've written down here is the Hale Bendy Corridor, that weird shape that they've come up with it's insane. But I think we should be very firm. I know from talking to others at Waverley that certainly Godalming is going to be very firm on the boundaries being the same. I'm pretty sure that Hazelmere is going to, but I'm not as confident as that one. So I think we all need to come up with, make them the same, be sensible, have 2-member wards, and don't regard the A31 as an absolute barrier to everything. It is more difficult, I think, to coalesce across it in the west of the borough, and generally we haven't already. But in the east of the borough, no, I don't see it as a brick wall stopping people going across. We've done it for a while, it seems to work. So there we are. I've come up with 5 points. Strategy and Finance have come up with 7. I think their points are good and valid. Putting the nitty-gritty on it, I think will be difficult, but I think we can give the Boundary Commission some very broad boundaries of the wards that we'd like to see. And we go back to 8 wards, 2 councillors each, 16 councillors, and decent shapes that, as Councillor Coburn so wisely remarked, that actually vaguely tie in with the parishes and what we know and love at the moment. It's a bit long, and I apologise for that, Mr. Mayor, but I feel very strongly about this. We have got to fight it. I will be doing my best to get Waverley to fight it and to come out with very similar conclusions to what is here before you in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Merriweather, followed by Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 2 very different points, really. The first is on process. We've got the reports in front of us with the recommendations, which I don't have a problem with. But it seemed to me during the leader's speech, we were grafting onto that a spreadsheet or some analysis that was produced after this discussion. I would not like to think, if I vote in favour of these points, I'm also voting in favour of whatever that spreadsheet happened to say, because I would have to abstain or even vote against because I'm not happy with the idea of Webden and Badshotley being sort of carved up in many respects. The status quo is not good in Webden. You know, there's you have a certain amount of arbitrary line drawing between the boundary within them, and that doesn't make any sense, and it can be improved on. But Webden and Badshotley are 2 villages, And they're two villages that are recognised independently in so many things that this council relies on elsewhere, like the design statement and the neighbourhood plan. It's just unthinkable that we would throw all of that in the bin to try and force a square peg into a round hole, so that we can be happy with something that's on a spreadsheet that half of us couldn't even read. So I have a greater point than that. The A31, has been around for over 800 years. It wasn't called the A31, but there was a Pilgrim's Way going all the way back to Thomas Beckett's time. And it is a natural boundary. It might be why Badshotley has always been a village, but I think it's a very arbitrary, artificial and dangerous game to start mucking around with those natural boundaries just to try and create another artificial boundary for reasons that we haven't all agreed on. Thank you.
Just to confirm, Councillor Merriweather, the recommendations don't make any reference to the spreadsheet and it doesn't make any reference to natural boundaries. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think that this boundary commission review creates enormous opportunity for confusion and controversy, in fact, as come from the comments. I agree with pretty well everything that Councillor Ward has said, actually. Myself and Councillor Martin happen to be the councillors and the only council in the existing arrangements that crosses the A31. And the reason for that is that actually there's more people live north of the A31 than south. And the split in Moor Park, twice as many people live in the north part of Moor Park as live in the south part. And that's going to get worse, actually. That split of population is going to get worse over the next few years because of all the developments that are happening in the north part of the town. The East Street development, the Cotswood Farm development, and the various other developments, like the Romead one and various other ones are all in the north part of the town. So that creates a problem, in fact, that if you have 16 councils, as we're now going to have, you're going to have at least one of these wards crosses the A31, and the figures from the Boundary Commission show quite clearly that you need 9 councillors north of the bypass and seven south. So you're going to have, and whether it's done at the east end of the town, or whether it's done in the middle, wherever it's done, one of the wards has got to cross the bypass, in fact. And that's just a simple fact to keep the wards the same in terms of number of electors per councillor. So that is quite a difficulty. And I don't quite know how you resolve that, because I understand what Councillor Merriweather is saying about his ward. It's just a difficult problem. I don't know what the solution is, but I do agree that we're far better with 8 wards of 2 members. In fact, the Boundary Commission solved the problem in a different way, because they created 7 wards with 5 of 2 members and 2 of 3 members. And that actually avoided the problem of having to split any ward across the bypass. But it has all the other disadvantages that people didn't like, of 3 councillor wards. And some of the wards look very odd. The one in south, the Bourne and Runford one looks a bit odd. You could, any of these things could work, but it just looks odd, and it wouldn't be very popular, I think, with most of the population. And the one in the north that looked extremely odd was the new Hale and Heath End one, which is a very strange shape, and took into it the part of Moor Park that's currently north of the bypass, and it didn't seem to have any real connection with the higher up part of it. So I had problems with the Boundary Commission's solution. It would solve some of the problems of not having to cross the bypass, but it would create other problems. This is just not an easy problem. The other thing I'll mention, because it's probably not at the forefront of everybody else's mind, but for Surrey councils, it creates another problem. We've got a simple situation at the moment. The East Surrey division is made up of 3 borough or town council wards. That's something that everybody understands. It makes it easier for the councillors the Surrey councils to know the town and borough councils are working with. It's not going to be like that from the next Waverley election, because the Surrey council wards will stay the same, and it would be an extremely difficult problem to keep them the same, because everything has to be divided by 3 if you're going to keep the things in alignment. And you'd have to go down from 9 wards to 6 wards to actually keep alignment between the two, and that would probably be unacceptable to people as well. So this is just an extremely difficult problem, and whatever we do, it's going to create difficulties. And I can't really see any way of keeping the alignment between the Surrey wards and the Waverley and Town Council wards. So a difficult problem. I think Council Ward has come up with probably the best solution, subject to probably further discussion about where exactly the ward should be that has to cross the bypass. So that's my comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Neil first, and then Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. Listening to what other members have just said here, I think, of course, we've all got an allegiance of all sorts to our current ward boundaries for various reasons, and familiarity is one of them, I guess. But I think the reality is that if we can't come up with a proposal here which we can put to Waverley, and Waverley hopefully put forward further, that has got some arithmetic logic to it, then we won't succeed in changing what the Boundary Commission wants to do at all. So the reason that there is a spreadsheet with some numbers in it, which are taken out of the projections coming from the Boundary Commission to what the situation is they're trying to achieve, I think it's 2027, wasn't it? You know, the reason for doing that was to try and find a way of us moving forward the discussion through Waverley with some proposal. And we're all going to find, whatever happens here, that our wards are going to change. We've concentrated so far on the east-west separation, because that clearly is a natural boundary to a large extent, but it's going to change all the wards, either on a significant aspect or on a minor aspect. One thing that we have been looking at, or one thing that does come out of this, is that there is a way to bring the town centre ones back together, whereas at the moment they're split, Moore Park being part of the town centre. So, I do think that if we're going to move forward on this and not be excluded altogether, then we're going to have to give some ground here somewhere on our current wards, and all of us have to accept that, if we can't come up with something that meets the numbers, the 10% variance, then we won't be making a contribution to the way forward at all. So that's my summing up of the situation. I know it's difficult for all of us, but I think that's where we find ourselves. Thank you.
Apologies, Councillor Coburn. Can I have the town clerk before? Yeah, okay.
It's a very quick point, because what I'm suggesting, or as I say, I'm pitching the idea from Councillor Martin, I'm not claiming it, that joining a reduced fir grove to the riverside bit solves an awful lot of issues. And it only goes back to what was there when I was first a councillor, with 6 wards of 3. And then they came in, presumably, in those days I didn't even care who did what, and they made it 9 artificial wards of 2. And they worked up to a point, but you had that anomaly when they had to suddenly add a bit more to Moore Park and shoved in East Street, and we're trying to avoid that with this review. I thought that was what they said. And we do have communities, and that bit of Farnham with sort of Fir Grove south and then going over Bridge Square, it naturally holds together. It's not as though you're cobbling together things that don't work. It's the normal route from Fir Grove Hill into the town anyway. So I think there is scope for putting that in. And as soon as I've pinched the felt tip pens from the grandchildren, I shall be drawing this on this map and seeing if I can get some figures to add up, because to me, you can still keep the essence of the the area, the Bourne, Moore Park, Firgrove, and yet, you know, achieve, if you like, you want your two-people ward, the two-people ward. I think what we don't want is just something cobbled on as we had last time to something else just to make up the numbers, because it never really works. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Town Clerk.
I'm not trying to contradict the leader, but I just wanted to clarify my understanding of where we are with this particular process, which is that it's a review of the Borough Council. As was already said, the Boundary Commission is not going to determine the parish council boundaries, and that is subject to the community governance review. So there wouldn't be a chance to actually go into the numbers in a bit more detail. And so I think, as Councillor Murray said earlier, it wouldn't be wise for us to back any particular horse, if you want to use that analogy, apart from actually saying what we're trying to deliver. And I think those are clearly set out in the recommendations that you have in terms of your preferences and your optimum solutions. I mean, there is always hostages to fortune, and we as a council would be signing up to something that we didn't know what the implications were if we just accepted that without taking the opportunity for a community governance review, which is the process that is to be followed to determine the actual ward boundaries. So I just wanted to clarify that point, because it's not the Boundary Commission. We won't lose that choice about finalising the actual wards, because that is a different process that's to follow.
I think we've got sufficient agreement here, so I think.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to come back on just on one specific point. I do agree with the recommendations. I agree with what the town clerk's just said. But the statement of balance of 8 representatives north and south of the preferable but achievable, it just isn't achievable. So there's no point in making that statement. You have to have 9 representatives north of the A31 and 7 south. That's just a fact. The population drives that numbers. That's shown very clearly in the Boundary Commissions, the way they've done things and the numbers that they've presented. So you can't do that. It means you actually have to have one ward crossing the boundary. So you have to have 9 in the north and 7 in the south. That's the fact.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. On that basis, I will take a vote on Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, you know, generally we're right. I think we have some very good overall conclusions that's come out of strategy and finance, which give the feeling and the way we want to move. Just to give you some dates and some feelings, the cut-off date for direct submissions, and I say direct because the town council may wish to make a direct input into the Boundary Commission, is the 13th of December. That is their final cut-off date. Waverley actually has a council meeting on the 14th of December, and we have negotiated a one-day extension for Waverley so that the council meeting doesn't need to shift. But 13th of December is the cut-off. The reason I think it would be very useful for these general points to go through is I know they're going through other town councils, and there is, I think the last meeting of the Waverley subcommittee is, I think, on something like the 17th of November in order to get it through the executive and into the council on the 14th. So I think this would be very useful to give Waverley some ideas as to what the council wants. And then should the town council wish to make a direct submission, because you know, that may be a good thing to do, they are more than welcome, or we are more than welcome to do so directly. But I do like this request to Waverley to do a governance review, because without that we can never achieve the balance of having the same wards in the two areas. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Neil.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just a very small point in the wording of number 5. You know, when it says the Moore Park area and name should be retained as a preference, I don't want it to be retained as it is. And that's the wording. I'm not quite sure whether, you know, the last thing we want is, I'm assuming if Moore Park is redrawn, as I think it should be with Compton and various other bits added in, you know, you don't want the area to be identical. Am I right? I mean, you want the name to be part of it. You want Moore Park to be included. You know what I mean? It's when it says the Moore Park area and name should be retained. It sounds as though you're asking for the ward to stand exactly as it is, and that's not what we're doing. If I you know, so we can just change that wording slightly.
So take out the words area and, yes, okay, is that agreed?
Yeah.
So Councillor Neil.
I was going to also make a point about that number 5, because you know, if we're too prescriptive about retaining that name or that boundary, then, you know, we can't make the other recommendations very easily. So I think in terms of the actual name, that will have to, like all the wards that come out of this, we'll have to consider the names probably later in more detail. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Sorry, I do think my residents would be rather concerned that they've been wiped off the map. They are Moore Park. It is quite an area of Farnham. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Town Clerk.
If I could just support what Councillor Martin's saying, but we have to recognise that the part of Moore Park north of the bypass isn't actually part of the traditional Moore Park. It's the part south of the bypass that is Moore Park, yeah? And that's where the name should be retained. It's anomalous that the East Street area is named Moore Park. In fact, people there don't think of themselves as living in Moore Park and Pontefract. But I agree with what Councillor Martin, what Councillor Coulson was saying, that retaining the name if possible.
Town Clerk.
Yeah, I think when I was trying to pull these recommendations together, probably what I should have done is not made 4 and 5 as 2 separate points, but to say the merging of Horn and Rumpole is not supported and the Moore Park name should be retained as a preference, because that's really what the essence of what the conversation was.
Do they know that Rumphole's about three buildings, a couple of horses and an orchard? You know, I mean, you know, we have actually any idea what Rumpole is now. Extraordinary.
Looks different from the top of the step ladder.
So can we agree that we merge point 4 and 5 together then? What the Town Clerk has suggested, is that agreed?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, so let's go to the recommendations, and I'll need a show of hands for what was recommendation 6. I'll read them out one by one. Number 1, alignment of town wards within the borough wards is a requirement. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Recommendation 2, reduction of town council members from 18 to 16 should be investigated. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
3, where possible, the pattern of 2-member wards is preferred. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Merging 4 and 5, the merging of Horn and Rumpole is not supported. The Moore Park name should be retained as a preference. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And I need a show of hands for 6. A balance of 8 representatives south and north of the A31 would be preferred if achievable. Those in favour, please show hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those against? 1. Okay.
I see.
Okay, so that is agreed.
Trying to round the circle with Councillor. Sorry, surely what he's saying is that we want 8 north and 8 south, but we perhaps are a bit flexible on where this boundary is. Currently it's the A31, but you know, if you adjust it, then maybe we can achieve both of what we want somehow or other.
But the wording that doesn't actually say that in the recommendation. We've now voted and agreed it.
There's always been wards across. I mean, you know, we're not inventing something. We can make them bigger or smaller, you know, but they go across and, you know, there's some scope. You little faith councillor
Okay, so all the councillors. So the final recommendation, a community governance review by the Borough Council will be undertaken by the Borough Council to determine the best pattern of options. Is that agreed?
Mr. Mayor, can I just correct the English slightly?
Yeah.
We seem to be a bit repetitive about the borough. Sorry, my apologies. We seem to be a bit repetitive about the Borough Council in there, and I think we ought to put it in that the Borough Council be requested to. I don't think much as though I would like to tell them what to do, and have tried on many occasions. We should do that. So I mean, the Borough Council will be requested to undertake a Borough Council review. I think would be perhaps slightly better phrasing.
Okay, with that amended wording, is that agreed? Thank you very much. Councillor Neil, back to you.
Okay, item 12 is review of the Surrey Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. So the working group received details of the Surrey Hills area. Councillor Coburn advised that the designated area affecting Farnham had been incorporated into the neighbourhood plan, and Farnham Town Council should support the extension of the AONB. So there's a recommendation there, please, Mayor.
So the recommendation is that it's recommended that officers work with the Surrey Hills AONB to optimise the extension around the Farnham area. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor.
Okay, on to item 13, which is the review of the Great Austins Conservation Area. Just to remind members, the GA Conservation Area has been in place for some time, and it's being reviewed as one of the reviews that goes on from time to time by the Borough Council. There was a meeting last night which affects this to a certain extent, if we're minded to. When we had the meeting here, it was considered that in strategy and finance that we would support the Borough Council's proposals on the GA conservation area. But last night there was a community meeting which did strongly put the points forward that they were not keen on one small section of the current conservation area, or maybe two actually, being excluded or changed in the review here. So the outcome of that was, from our point of view, there were 4 councillors there: Councillor Coburn, Councillor Bishop, myself, and Councillor MacLeod. That we felt it was probably right to have further discussions with the officers at Waverley to see if we can come to a better conclusion on that. So whilst it says here there are 2 recommendations, I would suggest that we withdraw the first recommendation at the moment, which is to support the realignment that's been proposed, and withdraw that for the moment for further discussion with the Borough Council and maybe some feedback there with the community. But we do support the second recommendation. So that's the broad situation. Would anyone else like to comment on that?
Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I mean, it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to the boundary that's suggested, or at least the first part. I'm not sure that the officers really quite explained the difficulty of having something that doesn't match up to the conservation area included within it in planning terms. And I felt the officers didn't really explain this clearly enough to the public. It's only it's two bits. There's only 3 properties, one of which was an old house, which was knocked down and made into flats. Waverley at the time challenged the inspector's decision, and we won the challenge but lost the war. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. It still got built, even though they said, you know, that basically it shouldn't have done. So you've got 3 houses which don't contribute to the actual character area of Great Austin, in the sense that Great Austin is on a grid, on a plateau, and these were, if you like, on an existing road. So I think we have some work to do on that. The other part was slightly different because it's a tiny, tiny piece of land, and the officers told us, and that's what we took our decision on, that it was part of a cottage, it's part of the curtilage of cottage, and therefore they had taken it out because basically they were, you know, tidying up the line. But in fact, what came out last night was that it's never been part of that cottage. It's always been a discrete piece of land. So I think we've got some work to do on ownership of that piece of land before we decide whether or not we can support it. So it's 2 tiny bits. We may well end up supporting it if we can explain to residents why it's important to have, you know, everything as you wish it within the conservation area, not just shove a load of other stuff in, which actually will work against the conservation area in planning. So I think we have to just revisit this first bit, just to make sure that you know, we do get it correct. But as I say, it's not that I'm objecting really to drawing it again, but I think we have to make sure that the residents know why and that we've given good, you know, explanation. Better than just we agree.
So I think we're asking for a change to the first part of the recommendation, leader.
Yes, I think so too. Perhaps town clerk could advise on the right words.
I'm not completely. Yeah. Okay.
What Councillor Coburn said, there obviously was some genuine points from the residents actually, and Councillor Coburn's outlined them. But I thought the officers were very patient actually, because they had some very eloquent speakers who actually were quite hard on the officers, and they did treat it with a lot of patience and forbearance. There was one chap that even suggested that we were doing this just to keep himself in the job, and then he walked out. And I thought that was rather unfair. But I congratulated the 2 officers at the end for the way they handled it. Although the residents clearly did some valid points to make. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Town clerk.
I think you've got 2 options in terms of what you do here. I mean, you could make recommendation 1 subject to clarification of particular points with Waverley and the community. You would support it, or you can do what the leader suggested, which is to just vote on the second part, which underlines the point that Councillor Coburn made about the features of the first one that don't enhance conservation area as a reason for it being excluded. Just vote on those important principles that are within the neighbourhood plan design statement already, and defer the first part of it for further discussions. What I'm not sure is the timescale for giving Waverley a response. I mean, if the response doesn't have to be given until the next council meeting, then we can quite happily defer it and come back to it. Okay, so if it's the 12th of November and as it's time critical, then you may have to then agree to delegate that once more information has been received. And if you were to delegate it, then you would normally delegate that perhaps to town clerk in consultation with maybe in this case input planning group and the chair of planning, because I think that it's planning related matters.
So is that agreed that we split this into 2 parts? So the first part will be as the town clerk has just explained. So can we have agreement for the change to the first part as town clerk has agreed. Is that agreed? And the second part is the maintenance of features such as cobbles that enhance the conservation area. Great Austins in accordance with the farm and neighbourhood plan and design statement be sought. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on to item 14, review of council policies and strategy. It is custom, as you know, for us to have a get together to discuss strategy for the next year forward. So we would like to do that this year, I think. So there's a proposal that we hold a meeting. Do we have the date for that? 18th of November. And there's also a suggestion from the town clerk here that for convenience, at the beginning of that meeting, we cover the annual, I think it is, a review of the South Street Trust at that meeting, just to take quite a short matter of time when we'll all happen to be together. So I think that's what we want to do there. Is that okay, town clerk? Anyone?
So is that agreed?
Okay, so on to the town clerk's update. There's a couple of points here which I think town clerk himself would perhaps clarify, go through for us.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, there's just a couple of quick points. One is I wish to bring in Councillor Dunsmore on a proposal, but there was also, would you like to say it, Councillor Dunsmore? Yeah, I've had, there's one item I forgot to raise in relation to some of the correspondence that I've had, which I'd like to draw attention to at the moment, and also seek a recommendation to continue the discussions. A long-standing partner family has a piece of land which they're considering potentially making available to the town council. I don't have authority really to progress those conversations further, so just wanted to draw attention to the fact that this discussion is underway. It's a little bit like we're talking about the Hale Recreation Ground, to enter into conversations to have further discussions, but I just need council to be aware that that is taking place. And if it looks like it's a possibility, then we bring it back to the next meeting of Strategic Finance and Council. It's a piece of land that has no developmental purpose, but it has some sustainability and biodiversity benefits. Subject to us having further discussions, it looks as if it's got some potential interest. I don't know anything more than that, so I can't go into detail without going into confidential, obviously. So what I'd like to get is permission to continue the discussion with the family to see if it's got potential interest. Is that agreed? Thank you. The second item is I've referenced there about replacing the flags at the Bagshot Lee Memorial. As you know, there are service flags. It's unusual in the sense of each of the war memorials around town, so we normally just have a Union flag, whereas at the Bagshot Lee Memorial, it contains flags of each of the services. They are looking a bit tatty now, and it's our custom and practice in recent years to replace the flags at each of the war memorials where they perhaps not as fitting as they should be. And we had a request to do that at Bagshot Lee. So Strategy and Finance said, yeah, that's a thing we should be doing. Subsequently, we've had a request for one of the silent soldiers to be placed at Recklesham. We have decided already to purchase a new silent soldier, which is a woman soldier, to balance up the male soldier for the rededication of the War Memorial in Goshen Meadow. And there's a request that we then purchase one for Recklesham of the woman soldier, so then they'd have a balance at that particular War Memorial too. To make life simpler, if councillors agree with that, I'll probably widen the proposal that if any of the war memorials request the same thing, that we actually do that, and we fund it from the small grant scheme.
Agreed.
Agreed.
To you, councillor Mill.
Okay, so we've covered that and we're right up to Article 16, which we haven't covered everything. So I think we finished the notes of this editing finance. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So is it agreed we accept those notes of the statutory and finance? Thank you very much, councillors. We then move on to Cemeteries and Appeals meeting held on the 21st of October 2021, and I invite councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be mercifully brief. Only one recommendation. One thing I just wanted to make is we are trying to make our cemeteries the best they can possibly be. And we put them into the competitions to see if we are achieving what we should be achieving. And we use the marks from South and Southeastern Blue to inform what we do in the cemeteries. We don't do it to win a gold medal. You know, it's getting the cemetery right that's the important thing, and the gold medal is the icing on the top. I think one or two people think that, you know, the only reason we do it at all is to win a prize. No, it's to make the cemeteries as good as they can be. There's just the one recommendation. This is the contentious item of the conifers at the entrance to West Street, which are, as we know, sort of past their best, to say the least. We've got, as we've heard earlier, our tree survey coming up, so this will be a good chance to look at the trees and get some expert advice. But the recommendation is that we do look at them, and that we some of the conifers at the entrance be removed and replaced with mature trees. And this will all be part of the cemetery gates refurbishment. We feel somehow that, you know, when you've got the gates fully restored to all their glory, you've got that vista up to the chapel, that we can perhaps improve it. So there's the recommendation to council from the cemeteries group.
So the recommendation is that some of the conifers at the entrance of West Street Cemetery be removed and replaced with mature trees as part of the cemetery gates refurbishment project. Is that agreed, councillors? And do we agree the notes submitted by councillor Coburn? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Next, we've got the HR panel held on the 20th of October 2021, and in the absence of councillor Attfield, who's the chair of this panel, I invite councillor Evans.
The minutes of that meeting are there, and anything which is exempt information has been provided to you on a pink piece of paper, and that is quite separate. A fruitful meeting was held. It's clearly minuted here. There are no recommendations. So I think merely it's to say, does anyone have any questions?
Town clerk.
Councillor Evans, just say that if members don't wish to discuss the item in exempt, the recommendation that's on that pink piece of paper should be the recommendation for the whole report. But if members want to go into exempt,
Yes.
then we will discuss it at that point.
Right. But we can't discuss it here anyway. No.
If members are content with the information contained in the pink paper, then they can accept the whole report. If they wish to discuss the detail of what's in the pink paper, then we'll need to go into exempt.
Does anybody wish to discuss any of the information on the pink paper? In which case we will need to deal with that in confidential session. Otherwise, are you happy to accept the minutes of the whole meeting?
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Item 7F, I think the town clerk will report on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is just to bring you up to speed on the Young People Task Group and the youth shelter. You'll be aware that we applied for a grant which was successful from the Police and Crime Commissioner towards the costs, and we also had a consultation during the summer on the type of youth shelter that would go within Gosford Meadow. Sorry, Brelly Walk. The consultation was held in Gosford Meadow at the events that we held there for young people in the summer. We need, for our financial regulations, to waive standing orders contracts in order to purchase the particular shelter that has been agreed. Price-wise, we took prices from several suppliers, and they're all broadly the same. But what I need in order to progress this without because there is just the one supplier, is to agree to waive standing orders contracts to purchase an Upton shelter from Lightmain Limited, following the consultation with young people, and at a cost of £8,850. And that figure may vary slightly for all the reasons that we've heard about with purchasing and stuff at the moment. And we have asked for a price, but we haven't yet received it. So but it's the waiving of the standing orders contracts that is what's needed at the moment. I mean, of course, at an indicative cost of £8,850, because it may just vary slightly.
So the recommendation is to note the receipt of a grant of £10,000 from the Police and Crime Commissioner Community Safety Fund towards the cost of the purchase and installation of a youth shelter in Borelli Walk, Waverley Borough Council, permission received, to agree to waive standing orders contracts to purchase an Upton shelter from Lightmain Limited following consultation with young people and indicative quotes received at a cost of £8,850. Is that agreed, councillors?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Blisham in the absence of Councillor Fraser to receive the minutes of planning and consultative group meetings.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it fairly brief because time's creeping on. As you all know, the Farnham Planning and Licensing Consultative Group meets every second Monday, occasionally extra because we've got loads and loads of work to do. We start at 9:30. Sometimes we haven't finished by lunchtime because there's so much work to do. There's a vast number of planning investigations to investigate. And the Waverley Borough Council planning portal is not the best at the moment. I'll explain that in a minute. Fortunately, we've got a lot of local knowledge which we can input. Waverley Borough Council is currently experiencing malicious attacks, they're called, to its planning site from an unknown third party. This is fairly new. They've been using a redware system that filters out malicious traffic, but it really slows down planning, which is another problem for us. I mean, we spend hours on the computer looking at the sites, trying to work things out. If you're interested in IT, it comprises a web application, firewall, and a bot protection. We've experienced long delays in planning long before they had this problem, and missing information, which is a current problem. Of particular note is the frequent lack of previous planning history and constraints document. Now, this is really important for planning, to know what's gone on beforehand and what constraints there are on it. So we have to work without that, which isn't ideal. We can't really fully consider things accurately without this information, but we have to at the time being because they can't provide it, allegedly. Farnham Town Council have arranged 2 meetings with Waverley Borough Council planners here shortly, so we can talk this through and see if we can sort it out, because it's perhaps done on our own turf and over it better than going over to the berries. One thing I must say is we've had incredible support from the Farnham Town Council Planning Officer, Jenny, who you all know. She's absolutely first class and a great help, and she really, really works hard. That's really all I've got to say, because I don't want to go through all these planning applications in detail, otherwise it'll be early in the morning. But as I said, well, that's true, as you know. As I said, we have a tremendous number of planning applications to work through, and I'm sure our partners' wives, etc., will tell you we're still there at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Because, you know, we do the job properly, and it's taking longer and longer and longer. So we really need to streamline this by trying to make Waverley more efficient if we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. We now move on to part 2, items to note. So, Town Clerk, any actions taken under the scheme of delegation?
No extra ones to report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Reports from other councils. Councillor MacLeod.
I'd just like to say something briefly about Surrey. I attended the Cabinet meeting this week to actually give a report to the Cabinet on a members group that I chair to do the greener future. And the interesting thing was the amount of time that the Cabinet is now spending on greener issues. That was really the big subject in the whole meeting. And even one of the we've got 2 Green members at Surrey, said he's noted a complete transformation at Surrey from when he first joined, when there was little interest in greener issues, and now it's one of the really major issues at the council. The other thing I wanted to just mention as I attended that meeting, we gave approval to the purchase of the Titus Meadow, or the study contribution towards the purchase of Titus Meadow, and then the exempt part, they actually gave approval to the specific money. They're contributing, I think it's 55%, and the other councils, including Farnham, are contributing in total 45%, I believe. So I just thought that would be of interest to people. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Anything from Waverley councillors? No. We'll move on then to reports from outside bodies. Anybody got reports from outside bodies? Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Neal, followed by Councillor Dixon.
Very briefly, the Farnham Sports Council is up and running again, and their AGM is on the 29th, and it looks quite an interesting agenda if anybody wants to support them there. And the other thing, I went to a webinar on biodiversity put on by NARC this week. And I don't know whether it's good or bad news really, but we seem to be doing an awful lot of it. So I found it not as quite as informative as possible, but I have made copious notes, and I will put them in through Councillor Dixon's group and also with Ian McCready. But really, most of the initiatives, we were already ahead of the game, which was good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just give you an update on the Farnham Public Art Trust, which I attend regularly on our behalf here. I would just say that it's a very active group. They meet frequently, and they're very supportive of what the Town Council is doing on various aspects that relate to their interests. So that's all good. They do make a lot of contributions to the public art field in the town. There's many examples of work that they have helped with around the town. Most recently, the Kitty Milroy murals at St. Mark's, where they've contributed to the renovation, or the lighting, I think in particular, of that work. They've had quite a lot of feedback on the craft month that we're running, which has been very positive, and I think there's also some feedback from the retailers that the activities of the craft month are helping in the town as well. So I just thought I'd mention that. The Public Art Trust is particularly interested at the moment in the Farnham Flame. They're very keen that it comes out of our depot down at West Street, which is getting a bit overgrown on the Flame at the moment, and it gets renovated. The Town Council is looking into the cost of doing that. It won't be insignificant, but the Public Art Trust have indicated that they would like to be able to make a contribution, and indeed some of the members there who represent other organisations in the town thought that they would probably help as well. So that will be very welcome to us, because it looks as if by default the Farnham Flame, which was hanging on the old Walmead site, has become property of the town council. There are suggestions that it should go on to the leisure centre building, where there's a suitable place at the moment, but the leisure centre is being considered for extension on that particular piece of wall. So the what's happening at the moment is we're going to wait to see what Waverley, how that progresses at Waverley, and at the same time see if we can get some feeling as to how and when and at what cost this flame item might be renovated. It is quite impressive when you see it up, and it's especially in its if it's smartened up from what it is at the moment. So those are the main things. They want to be involved or continue to be involved in the conservation area task group, where they've been quite one of the more active external members. So they would like us to invite them to join that as well. And of course, with a number of things that they're doing around the town, I think we hopefully would support that as well. So there you are. There's a quick update on what's happening there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you. I attended the meeting for the Farnham Hill Carnival group. The Hill Carnival is held the first week in July on the Hill cricket field. I think that's the correct place for it. They seem in very good shape after the pandemic, because that carnival's actually been cancelled for 2 years on the trot. I think they made the decisions at the right time, so that they didn't incur very many penalties, particularly the first time we had the lockdown. So that they do seem to be, they're up and running to run the carnival again this year. They had actually organised a fundraiser for Halloween tomorrow night at the Hill Village Hall, but unfortunately they have cancelled that because of there's still a feeling in the community that COVID is too prevalent, and other events of a similar nature are not getting very strong turnout. So they've actually, might be talking to Ian about trying to get them a grant there, because they had to pay for some of the fees and then they've had to cancel because of COVID. So that was a bit unfortunate, but they are going ahead quite strongly, and looks forward to that carnival next year.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Town Clerk.
It would be very unusual for us to give a grant for a cancelled event. They can apply for grant towards the carnival next year, but I'm not sure that there's a mechanism we can find to support a cancelled event.
Okay. Item 12, date of next meeting. Is it agreed that the date of the next meeting be Thursday, December the 16th at 7 p.m? Is that agreed? And it's not necessary to exclude the press and public. So I declare the meeting closed at 9:45. Well done, everybody. Thank you very much.
Very good.
I have a bottle of wine. Why is it finish off? Hello. Heads up.
Yeah.
Inside, travel fixtures. It's coming up 9 minutes in November. So the recommendation to approve the office. So I think somebody like that. Here.
Right. Very, very, very much.
Yes. I know that would give it like 2019 application. It was the wrong way. But we don't need that one then. Contents.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh, you
I'll make a note of that.